So we've got a couple more minutes before we're officially starting this session, but I should introduce myself. My name is Allison O'Neill. I am the chair of the Water Engineering Technology program, and I also teach in the program. So I've been with the Water Engineering program now for 15 years. So I've been around quite a while. So I should be able to answer any and all of your questions that you have. I don't really have a formal presentation that I'm going through. I thought I would let the people attending kind of lead and see where you want to take the line of questioning to.
Allison, what are the local job prospects for water engineering technology?
Okay, yeah, that's a great question. So there are lots of jobs in the water industry. Just to give you an idea, right now, or the stats for the last, I don't know, decade or so, they say that usually between 95 and 97% of our graduates have jobs within their field of practice within 6 months of graduating. So we have a really high employment rate. Now, in general, most of the jobs are located where the highest populations occur because usually water is centered around people's need to use water and treat water. And most of the time when we've done something bad to the environment, it's where lots of people live. So, so high population centers like the Okanagan, like the island and the lower mainland are generally where the most of the jobs are located. So is there jobs specifically in the Okanagan? Yes, there is.
Excellent.
But one thing I always say to all of the people who come into our program is you and every other person in Canada wants to work in the Okanagan. So it is more competitive in the Okanagan. So that's just something you might have to try a bit harder and be more persistent and be prepared to wait a little longer for the position that you want locally. I also know that lots of, excuse me, graduates often go off and get some experience in other regions, and then they come back into the Okanagan once they've got their credentials in order. So that's another thing that students often do. Mm-hmm. Does that answer your question, Marianne?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, great. How about anybody else? Anybody's got anything you want to know about what we do, or should I give you a spiel?
I could ask another question.
Yeah, for sure.
Can you please describe some typical work days as a water engineering technologist? What would the workday look like?
Oh, well, that's extremely variable.
Okay.
So it depends. Our students work in all aspects of the water industry. So you can find a student working for a municipality in their distribution system, let's say. So they might be the ones who they arrive in the mornings, usually fairly early, a union type job. They start 7 in the morning, and they usually started off with a kickoff meeting with their bosses, and then they'll go out and be assigned a set of tasks for the day, usually repairs or monitoring. So they'll go around the distribution system and check on fire hydrants, valves, pressure reducing stations. They'll go out and do maintenance checks on booster stations, everything that takes all the pipes that get water out into the communities. And they may be digging up facilities and excavating and repairing, or pulling a pump apart and doing maintenance on it. So that might be a typical day for someone who works in the distribution system. And then you can contrast that with, say, someone who ends up working for, say, a regional district person as, let's say, an environmental coordinator or a water quality specialist. Their day would maybe look a little bit different. Maybe they show up and they go into more of an office type setting. Again, same thing, they have their workloads, they're assigned, maybe they have to go out and collect some water samples. Maybe they have to meet with some community members and do some outreach. Perhaps they have some ongoing studies that they're doing where they're looking at different aspects of coordinating environmental issues related to water in their community. So it can be anywhere in between that. Does that help you, Marianne?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so it's really variable is the main thing I can say. So I have everybody from desk jockeys to people who spend most of their time in overalls.
Okay. Does the workload fluctuate seasonally or is it steady throughout the year?
For the most part, it is throughout the year. So this work goes, yeah, most jobs are permanent, continuing positions. We don't have a lot of seasonal work. Yeah, the only, I guess the exception, there are a few exceptions, like there are some jobs with places like Parks Canada, which have a tendency to be a bit more seasonal. But for the most part, work is year round and it's permanent full-time hires.
Wonderful.
Yeah. All right.
What does the academic program look like?
Sorry, pardon me?
What does the academic program look like? What kind of courses will we be taking?
Oh, okay. Yeah, for sure. So when you come into the program, it's an engineering technology program. So what that means is it's an applied science program. So when you come into the program, you'll be taking, let's say for your first semester, you're taking an instrumentation class, which is essentially an applied physics class. You're taking a hydrology class, which is the study of moving water, which again is a type of applied physics. You'll be taking sort of an introductory math class. You'll be taking a communications class. You'll be taking chemistry, but again, a very specific water-based, sort of getting you up to speed so you can do the more water-based chemistries. And, oh, what's the other class you're taking? Oh, right, a class on water quality, which is essentially applied chemistry. So we basically, a lot of our students say with our courses, they really like them because we take sort of courses that are in high school, which seem to not have a lot of points. Say, okay, I'm learning about this chemistry business, but what do I care about molecules? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. But we take that information on chemistry and we use it in real world applications. So all of a sudden the students go, oh, okay, that's why I need to know this chemistry, or that's why I need to know this physics. And so it's kind of funny when all of a sudden you see the light bulbs go off the student's head. It's like, wow, that's why I learned that formula in physics in grade 11. And so it just is better for people. The workload is quite heavy because it is 6 courses, and it's 6 courses every semester. But basically throughout this, the most common threads are you're taking chemistry every semester. You're taking water quality / water treatment classes every semester. You're taking some sort of applied hydrology or applied hydraulics, which is the moving water part, pretty much every semester. And then we have a whole series of support courses around that. So instrumentation and computer applications, operations and maintenance, and more maths because you need to know how to do math, some communications, and then lots of project-based work. So it's a heavy workload. The first semester is generally the hardest that students have because they have to figure out how to manage the workload and meet all the expectations. And then usually once they've got that first semester under their belt, they kind of go, oh, okay, I figured out what I need to know to be successful in this program. So, but yeah, so it's a lot of work, but because it's a cohort-based program, which means you're with all the same students and all the classes together, you develop a really strong sense of camaraderie with your fellow classmates. You work together on projects and homework. They became lifelong friends. And so because you're sort of trial by fire together, there's a lot of support and helping. And it's quite nice to see, actually.
How many students are accepted into the first semester?
We can take up to 40 students if we're super full. We prefer to cap it at around 36 students. our enrollment over the last couple of years has been a little bit lower than, and this past year with COVID, it has been quite a bit lower because students were kind of scared off with the COVID situation. But yeah, normally we sit usually around 30 students in our incoming class, but we have had some years as high as 44, and that was just crazy, too many students. But the nice thing about it is we have small classes, so you really get to know all your professors. There's a lot of support there. We know when you don't come to class, we phone you up and say, where are you? So it's not like the big universities where you're sitting in a classroom with 300 other undergraduates and your professor couldn't know if you were dead or alive, and you just kind of do your thing and hope for the best. So that's what we usually do, but it's nice. And normally when it's not COVID, we come in, we have a nice orientation week with an icebreaker. So the first year students get to know each other and the second year students. We usually have lots of industry events too that happen throughout the year. If it's not a COVID year, hopefully we go back to that next year, because we try to get students out into industry and volunteering opportunities with groups around town. So it is a lot of what we do is trying to create networks between the students and with the students and people out who are already in the industry.
How many people do you have registered just right now?
Right now, my first year cohort is 18 students, and my graduating class this year is going to be about 25 students. And then I have a third group of students who's currently out on co-op right now, and they're a big group. They're about 35 students.
And what does co-op look like?
So how it works is you come in September, you do your first academic semester, and then you do your second academic semester. And then you go off and that's your first co-op semester, just like normal in the summer. And then there's a second co-op semester that happens from September to January. So you don't come back to school for 8 months. So your third semester, you come from January to essentially the end of April, and then you do your third co-op session over the summer, and then you come back and you finish your final fourth semester starting in September, and you actually graduate in December. So the whole program is actually 7 semesters. So, which is a little bit different. So 4 academic semesters and 3 co-op semesters. Now we have a co-op office here, and they help the students get co-op positions. And depending on the year to year, our co-op positions, the number of students that get, it's not mandatory, and nor is it guaranteed to get a co-op position. It's a competitive process. But we usually have somewhere between 60 and 75% of the students get a co-op position. Now, this past year with the co-op scare or the COVID scare, it was a little weird. A lot of students who had jobs, their jobs got canceled. And so this last year has been really kind of nutty, but it looks like even the students who are off on their second co-op right now, a lot of those students ended up getting jobs in the end because they were just deferred after people figured out how the COVID was affecting everything.
And a semester is 3 months?
4 months.
4 months?
Mm-hmm.
And what does a COVID class look like right now?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. So COVID looks a lot like this for the lectures. So excuse me, I don't have COVID, but I do have bronchitis. So the students do their lectures, so their class time is spent online, but then our labs are in person. So the students will come into a lab space like this one. And I don't know if you can tell, I've moved out of the way, but we've got things set up so that the students are socially distanced from one another when they come in. And we've got all the cleaning supplies, and so the students have to wear masks and such when they come in here to do their work. and we've made the labs, limited the number of students that come in, but so all the labs are in person pretty much, and the lectures are online. And that's the way it's going to be this semester, also in January. And it's a little bit uncertain what September is going to look like yet. I've heard they're hoping to have everything back to normal again, but excuse me, it's going to completely depend on the COVID numbers. So, but I'm thinking by then we'll really know what we're doing as far as being able to teach effectively in a COVID environment. It was a pretty steep learning curve in the beginning last year when partway through the semester we went offline and weren't allowed to have students in the classroom. We had 1 weekend to transition. So it was very exciting. But I think the students are getting used to it a little bit, but we're really hoping that next year we're back to just normal in-person everything. Maybe there'll still be some social distancing requirements, but yeah, that's our hope.
Have you found grades being affected because of COVID?
I wouldn't say necessarily grades, but I would say that more students have dropped courses this semester than is normal. And I think it's because they're struggling with working by themselves. So they've made the decision, instead of to do poorly on 6 classes, to do good on 4 classes or 5 classes, and then come back and pick up the courses that they dropped later on. So I think students are being a little bit strategic and are aware of that it is more difficult for students to do online than it would be if they were coming to class every day.
How many hours per week should we plan to budget for Zoom coursework as well as homework per week?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so basically, you're going to be in some form of lecture or lab for about 30 hours a week. So just coming to class is kind of like a full-time job. Then I usually say a good rule of thumb is for every hour you spend in class, you should spend an hour outside of class. And, you know, but I would say at least budget another 20 hours a week for homework. There are students who work when they're in the program, but it's hard. They're very determined people. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So, and you know, it is a lot of courses. So some students do benefit from taking a reduced course load, and so they'll end up taking a couple extra semesters to graduate, which is totally fine. As I always tell them, you don't get a prize for graduating first, right? So the most important thing is to graduate. And if you need to take 4 courses a semester, then you need to take 4 courses a semester.
You just answered my question. My question was, would it be what would be a recommended COVID course load because there's no teams?
Yeah, it really depends on the person. You know, I have students who are thriving and taking 6 classes, and I have some who just said, no, it's not for me when I'm on my own. They struggle with sitting behind the computer. And independent working is hard for them. So they benefit from a course load that's maybe 4 classes or 5 classes. But it really is, it's up to the individual to assess that, you know. Yeah. Because let me put it this way, out of my class of approximately 20 first-year students, 15 of those are taking the full load. So the majority of students are making this work.
What's the average salary for somebody coming out on the first year?
Oh, again, quite job specific. And some areas pay substantially more money than others. But if you had in your head around $50,000 a year as a starting spot, that's probably a good number. Yeah.
That's
There are
substantially
some-
better than most first-year civil engineers.
Yeah. Yeah, that's because our jobs, a lot of them are union.
Mhm.
So, and it depends on the area. Like you might get $40,000 somewhere or $60,000 in another place. So like if you go into the lower mainland, you get paid a lot of money. If you're maybe in a smaller municipality, maybe you're closer to 40, right? When you're just starting off. But the prospects are very good for like, this is, people often come into this industry because they know that they're going to be paid living wages that are reasonable with pensions and benefits and all that stuff, which it doesn't mean a lot to people when you're talking to them when they're 18 years old, right? But it's kind of nice to know that, you know, you're gonna make a nice living when you graduate, and especially for a young person. Like, holy moly, some of my students that have come right out of high school. So my last student, who was quite young, he was 17. He graduated when he was 19, and you know, he was off working and making $45,000 a year at 19 years old. I don't know too many other 19-year-olds doing that. So, and then he made the decision actually to go off to BCIT and get his Bachelor of Science in Ecological Restoration. So that's where he is right now. And he's going to graduate that when he's 21 or 20, 21? Yeah, 21. So lots of opportunities for young people.
The students that you have now, you said that team work was something that used to happen before COVID, but I'm sure that teamwork can still happen with COVID.
Yeah, it sure is. The students are just being a bit more strategic about it. Normally, right outside of our main lab here is a sort of study hangout area. And in normal times, the students would just be there from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, and they'd be working together in between classes. And so it's much more organic, right? But now they're having to do Zoom meetings like this where they hook up, or they might get together in small groups to work on projects together. So it's not quite as, hey, we're all doing our work together. Just they're a little bit more, I guess, focused on who they're hanging out with. Yeah.
With seniority, is there much room for advancement in this career?
Oh my goodness. Yes, absolutely yes. In our industry, they've done a number of sort of looking at the state of our number of people we have working versus the number of people we're going to need going forward. And they say in the next, I think it's the next 10 years, they're going to need 5,000 new workers in our field just because of retirements. And it's kind of an old person's industry a little bit. And you go into any room and there's a lot of gray hair. And even in the last few years, locally, let's say the city of Kelowna, we've seen a huge turnover, which is going to continue. So lots and lots of opportunities for advancement. Yeah, just tons of them. And everyone is worried about shortages of hiring people right now. So yeah, there's lots of competition for hiring good people. So especially once you get your certifications.
You mentioned that there's a lot of competition for co-op. What do you mean? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, for sure. So how it works is the co-op job board is kind of like a dating service, right? So they bring employers and students together, and then the employers decide of the co-op students that apply for the co-op positions, which ones they're going to interview. So that process is competitive, and excuse me. And so, you know, students that have more experience or students that have safety certificates, they get preferentially hired over students who don't, right? So that's what I mean by competitive. And also, students have to be willing to move, because there's not always going to be a job in exactly where you are. So I find that the students who are more willing to move to another town are more likely to get a co-op position. So if you want to stay home and live with your mom and dad during the summer, you have to accept that then you're competing for a very specific job market. Whereas a student who can move will have more ability to get a job. And I always suggest to the students that they move and take a job as far away from home as possible. It's an adventure, and it'll improve their employment outcomes for certain. All right. Any other questions? Okay. Rosie, you've been quiet in the background. Is there anything you wanted to ask me?
No, I think you covered everything already.
Okay. All right.
In the first year, roughly how many labs is there? Is it a weekly thing?
Oh yeah, you have labs every week. So in chemistry, hydrology, water quality, instrumentation, you have labs every week. So, and the students like it because our labs are hands-on. I mean, you can get the idea by sort of looking around at some of our equipment we have in here. So you're doing stuff, right? So these in general are not labs where you're just sitting there researching something. So the students like to come in and do the practical work. And it does help advance their learning for sure. Yeah.
Can you give examples of some practical labs?
Oh, for sure. So I'll use my class as an example. I teach the first year applied hydrology class. And this past week, the students went out to a little creek that runs right adjacent to the college here. And they collected surface water samples, and then they did some field analysis of those samples. And then they brought bottles of the samples back to this lab here. And then they measured them for dissolved phosphates. And then they'll have to write a little lab report up on that and discuss what is meant by those phosphates and where they came from, whether it's a good amount of phosphates, a bad amount of phosphates. So they'll have to do a little research into that. So that's a typical lab. We also did another lab this semester where we went out to Mission Creek. We go to Mission Creek quite a bit in my first year class, and we measured the flow rate. So how much water is going through the creek. And we use 3 different methods for that. So the student, we spend time out at the creek and collecting data that way. In another class, let's say in Dave Teasdale's water quality class, you would be learning how to analyze different samples for different water quality parameters. And then you'd also be learning techniques to improve water quality. So to treat the water to make it either safe to drink or safe to discharge back into the environment. So those are some of the types of hands-on labs that we do. We also have an operations and maintenance course where you're pulling apart pumps and valves and learning how to use hand and power tools, which students like that. So Is that enough of an example, Sylvain?
Yes, yes, thank
Okay.
you.
Okay, great. Awesome. Okay, well, we're coming to the end of our half an hour time here. So the only thing I can say to you is if you have more questions, you can always email me. My contact information is on the website. So you can send me an email. That's the easiest way to get in touch with me. And I'll happily respond to you. All right.
Okay, well, thank you for your time.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
Bye-bye.
Everybody have a lovely day.
Thank
Bye
you
now.
so much, Allison, for the presentation. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your day. I hope you feel better soon.
Thank you. You have a lovely day too. Bye, Rosie.
Bye, thank you.
Yeah, take care of yourself.